The airport was alive with the hum of activity. People rushed to their gates, dragging suitcases behind them, while others sat patiently in rows of uncomfortable chairs, scrolling through their phones or reading books. The air smelled faintly, of coffee and fast food, mingling with the occasional waft of perfume from travelers passing by. It was a typical day at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, but for Maya Johnson, it would turn into anything but ordinary. Maya stood near, Gate 23, her carry-on bag resting at her feet. She glanced at her watch and sighed softly. Her flight to Washington, D.C. wasn't scheduled to leave for another hour, but she preferred being early. Punctuality mattered to her. It always had. A tall, poised woman in her early 30s, Maya, exuded confidence. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, and her sharp features carried an air of determination. She wore a simple yet elegant navy blue blazer over a white blouse paired with black slacks. To anyone watching, she looked like just another professional traveler heading to a meeting or conference. But Maya wasn't just any traveler. She worked as a senior consultant for the Department of Defense, specializing in advanced technology projects that most people could only dream of understanding. As she waited, Maya absent-mindedly checked her phone, scrolling through emails. One message caught her eye, a reminder about a high-profile presentation she was scheduled to give the next morning. The thought brought a small smile to her face. She loved her job, even if it came with its share of stress. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off today. Maybe it was the way some of the security guards seemed to be glancing her way more often than usual, or maybe it was just paranoia. Either way, she decided not to dwell on it. Suddenly, two men approached her. They were dressed in uniforms, police officers, and they moved with purpose. Maya looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" she asked, politely, slipping her phone back into her pocket. One of the officers, a burly man with short blonde hair and a stern expression, spoke first. "Ma'am," he said gruffly, "we need you to come with us." Maya frowned, confusion etched across her face. "Why? Is there a problem?" "We've received reports of a theft," the second officer chimed in. He was leaner, with close-cropped brown hair and cold eyes. "You match the description of the suspect." "Theft?" Maya repeated, incredulous. "I haven't stolen anything, I'm just waiting for my flight." "We'll determine that," the first officer replied, his tone firm. "Now please, come with us." Maya took a step back, instinctively putting distance between herself and the officers. She held up her hands, showing she wasn't a threat. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but you're making a mistake. I work for the government. You can check my ID." Instead of calming the situation, her words seemed to irritate the officers further. The blonde one, his badge read Officer Miller, narrowed his eyes. "Don't try to play games with us, ma'am. Just cooperate, and this will go smoothly." Cooperate? Maya felt a surge of anger bubbling inside her. She hadn't done anything wrong, and now these men were treating her like a criminal. But she knew better than to escalate things. Years of navigating corporate boardrooms and government offices had taught her how to stay composed under pressure. Taking a deep breath, she reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Flipping it open, she showed them her identification card, complete with her name, photo, and official title. "This should clear things up," she said evenly, holding the card out toward them. "I'm here on business. I fly out regularly for work. If you call the number listed here, someone will confirm who I am." For a moment, neither officer moved. Then Officer Miller snatched the ID from her hand, barely glancing at it before handing it to his partner. "We'll verify this," he muttered, "but until then, you're coming with us." Before Maya could protest, Officer Blake, the leaner one, grabbed her arm roughly. Instinctively, she tried to pull away, but he tightened his grip. Panic began to creep in as she realized they weren't going to let her go quietly. "You're hurting me," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "Let go." Around them, passengers started to take notice. Some craned their necks to see what was happening, while others whipped out their phones to record the scene. A young mother nearby shielded her child's eyes, whispering urgently to her husband. An elderly man shook his head in disbelief. muttering something about racism under his breath. Maya caught snippets of the murmurs around her, each one fueling her growing frustration. "Please," she pleaded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding. "I haven't done anything wrong. Why are you doing this?" "You'll get your chance to explain yourself," Officer Miller snapped, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Right now we're following procedure." "Procedure?" Maya wanted to scream. This wasn't procedure, it was harassment. And yet, there was nothing she could do to stop it. As Officer Blake forced her arms behind her back and clicked the cuffs into place, tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not from pain, though her wrists burned where the metal dug into her skin, but from sheer indignation. How dare they treat her this way? With no regard for her dignity, the officers marched her toward a nearby security office. Every step felt like a betrayal, not just of her rights as a citizen, but of everything she'd worked so hard to achieve. She thought about all the late nights, the sacrifices, the battles she'd fought to rise to her position. None of it mattered here. To these men, she was just another black woman they could toss aside without consequence. Inside the cramped office, Maya was made to sit on a hard plastic chair while the officers reviewed her ID and called the number listed on it. She remained, silent, staring straight ahead, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her breakdown. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Videos of the incident spread like wildfire across social media, sparking outrage among viewers who couldn't believe what they were seeing. Hashtags like "War Justice for Maya" began popping up, accompanied by calls for accountability. An hour passed, or maybe it was longer. Time blurred together in the sterile confines of the room. Finally, the door opened, and a supervisor entered looking flustered. "Ms. Johnson," he said, avoiding her gaze, "you're free to go. We've confirmed your identity and we apologize for the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? The word left a bitter taste in Maya's mouth. This wasn't a simple mix-up. It was a blatant act of discrimination. Still, she didn't argue. Instead, she stood, rubbing her sore wrists, and walked out without another word. Outside, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions at her, but she ignored them all. There would be time for statements later. For now, she needed to focus on getting to Washington, D.C., and ensuring that this wouldn't happen to anyone else ever again. Maya stepped out of the airport security office, her mind racing with a mix of emotions: anger, humiliation, and a burning desire for justice. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The cool air outside felt like a small relief after the suffocating tension inside that tiny room. Reporters and onlookers were still gathered nearby, their cameras flashing and voices clamoring for her attention. But Maya wasn't ready to talk yet. Not here, not now. She needed time to process what had just happened and to figure out her next move. As she walked away from the crowd, she pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked it, but her expression hardened with resolve. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for: General Carter Hayes. He was one of the highest-ranking officials at the Pentagon, someone Maya had worked closely with on several projects. Though they didn't always see eye to eye, she respected him, and more importantly, he respected her. If anyone could help her make sense of this mess, it was him. Maya pressed the call button and held the phone to her ear. It rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. "General Hayes speaking." "Sir, it's Maya Johnson," she said, keeping her tone calm and professional despite the storm brewing inside her. "I'm sorry to bother you, but something has come up, and I need your advice." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Of course, Ms. Johnson, what's going on?" Maya hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much detail to share, but then she reminded herself that this wasn't just about her, it was about exposing a system that allowed such injustice to happen. "I was detained at O'Hare Airport today," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Two police officers accused me of theft based solely on my appearance. They restrained me in front of dozens of witnesses, even after I showed them my ID and explained who I am. It took over an hour for them to confirm my identity and release me." The line went silent for a few seconds. When General Hayes finally spoke, his voice carried a mix of disbelief and anger. "Are you serious? This is unacceptable." "I know, sir," Maya replied, her voice firm. "And I don't want this to be swept under the rug. These officers need to be held accountable. People need to understand that this kind of behavior isn't okay. Not in 2023. Not ever." General Hayes let out a heavy sigh. "You're absolutely right. No one should have to go through what you've experienced, especially someone in your position. Let me assure you we will address this immediately." Maya felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, but there's more." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been treated unfairly because of their race or background. If we don't take action, it'll keep happening." "You're preaching to the choir, Ms. Johnson," General Hayes said, his tone softening slightly. "Trust me, I understand the weight of this situation. Give me the names of the officers involved, and I'll make sure the appropriate authorities are notified. We'll also review any footage available to ensure nothing is overlooked." Relief washed over Maya, though it was tinged with caution. She knew better than to assume everything would magically fall into place. Still, having someone like General Hayes on her side gave her a sense of empowerment. "Thank you again, sir. I'll send you all the information I have as soon as possible." "Do that," he replied. "And please take care of yourself. You've been through a lot today." After ending the call, Maya leaned against a nearby pillar, letting the gravity of the conversation sink in. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Crying wouldn't solve anything. Action would. Meanwhile, back at the airport security station, officers Greg Miller and Ryan Blake returned to their desks, seemingly unfazed by the events of the past hour. They exchanged smirks as they recounted the story to their colleagues, laughing off the accusations of racial profiling. To them, it was just another day on the job, a minor inconvenience that would blow over in no time. Captain Laura Simmons watched the scene unfold from across the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had been supervising the precinct for nearly a decade, and while she prided herself on maintaining order, moments like this made her question whether she was doing enough. Something about the way Miller and Blake brushed off the incident rubbed her the wrong way. Their casual dismissal of Maya's ordeal struck a nerve, reminding her of similar cases she'd seen throughout her career. Simmons sighed and turned her attention to the stack of paperwork on her desk. Buried beneath reports and memos was a folder marked complaints. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside were records of grievances filed against various officers, including Miller and Blake. Most of the complaints alleged excessive force or discriminatory behavior, but none had resulted in disciplinary action. Each case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence, or so the official reports claimed. As she flipped through the pages, Simmons couldn't shake the feeling that she was complicit in perpetuating the problem. By staying silent, by allowing these patterns to continue unchecked, she was enabling the very behavior she despised. But speaking up came with risks. Accusing fellow officers of misconduct could alienate her from the team, making it harder to do her job effectively. And yet, ignoring the issue felt equally wrong. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching her desk. Looking up, she saw Lieutenant Mark Dawson standing there, his face unreadable. "Laura, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but urgent. "What is it?" she asked, closing the folder and setting it aside. "It's about the woman who was detained earlier," Dawson replied, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. "Word's getting out. There are already videos circulating online, and people aren't happy. Some higher-ups are starting to ask questions." Simmons frowned. "Higher-ups? Like who?" Dawson hesitated before answering. "The Pentagon, apparently. Someone called in a favor." The news hit Simmons like a punch to the gut. The Pentagon? That meant this wasn't just a local issue anymore. It was national, and potentially explosive. She rubbed her temples, trying to think clearly. "We need to get ahead of this," she said finally. "If we wait too long, it'll spiral out of control." Agreed, Dawson said. But how? Do we handle it without throwing Miller and Blake under the bus? Simmons stared at him, incredulous. Are you serious? Those two brought this on themselves. If they hadn't acted so recklessly, none of this would be happening. I'm not defending them, Dawson countered quickly. But if we come down too hard, it'll look like we're scapegoating them. The union will fight back, and things will only get worse. For a moment, Simmons considered arguing further, but she realized Dawson had a point. This situation required finesse, not brute force. Fine, she said reluctantly. Let's gather all the facts first. Review the footage, interview witnesses, and document everything. Whatever happens, we need to be prepared. As Dawson nodded and walked away, Simmons sank back into her chair, her mind racing. She glanced at the closed folder on her desk and felt a pang of guilt. Maybe it was time to stop turning a blind eye. Maybe it was time to do the right thing, even if it meant risking everything. Back at the terminal, Maya boarded her delayed flight to Washington, D.C., her mind swirling with plans. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to fight. Not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved better. As the plane lifted off the ground, she stared out the window, watching the city shrink below her. Somewhere, in the distance, change was waiting to happen, and Maya intended to be the one to make it happen. The flight to Washington, D.C. gave Maya some much-needed time to think. She sat by the window, her head resting against the cool surface of the plane's wall. Outside, clouds drifted past like cotton balls in an endless blue sky. But Maya wasn't admiring the view. Her mind was racing, replaying every moment of what had happened at the airport. The way the officers had looked at her with suspicion, the roughness of their hands as they restrained her, the whispers of onlookers who watched, it all unfold. It was burned into her memory. She pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. Typing helped her organize her thoughts. First, she wrote down everything she could remember about the incident, the names of the officers, their behavior, the reactions of the people around her. Then she jotted down ideas for how to move forward. One thing was clear, this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about exposing the flaws in a system that allowed such injustice to happen. And if anyone could make that happen, it was her. When the plane landed, Maya collected her things and headed straight for her apartment. She lived in a quiet neighborhood not far from the city center. Her home was modest, but comfortable, filled with books and framed photos of family and friends. After setting her bag down, she turned on the news. As expected, her story was everywhere. Social media had exploded with outrage over the footage of her detainment. Protesters were already gathering outside the airport, holding signs that read "Justice for Maya" and "End Racial Profiling Now." The hashtag #JusticeForMaya had gone viral, sparking debates across the country. Maya felt a mix of emotions as she scrolled through the posts. On one hand, she was grateful for the support. So many strangers were standing up for her, sharing her story and demanding change. But on the other hand, she couldn't help feeling overwhelmed. This wasn't the kind of attention she wanted. She didn't ask to become a symbol for a movement. All she wanted was accountability, and maybe a little peace after a long, exhausting day. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Messages poured in from colleagues, friends, and even people she barely knew. Some offered words of encouragement, while others asked how they could help. One message stood out, a text from General Hayes. "We're mobilizing federal agents to investigate," he wrote. "Stay safe and let me know if you need anything." Maya smiled faintly. At least someone was taking this seriously. She replied with a simple "thank you," then set her phone aside. For now, she needed to focus on preparing for tomorrow. She had a meeting scheduled with senior Pentagon officials to discuss her latest project, an advanced AI system designed to monitor public servant conduct. Ironically, this technology might end up playing a role in addressing the very issue she'd faced today. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, federal agents arrived at the airport. Led by Agent Daniel Brooks, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and no-nonsense approach, the team wasted no time getting to work. They requested access to surveillance footage, reviewed witness statements, and interviewed both officers Miller and Blake. The officers remained defiant, insisting they had done nothing wrong. "We followed protocol," Officer Miller said, leaning back in his chair during questioning. "If she has a problem, that's on her." Agent Brooks raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Protocol? Restraint without probable cause doesn't sound like protocol to me." The next morning, Maya woke up early. She stood by her kitchen window, sipping a cup of coffee as the sun rose over the city. The quiet gave her a chance to gather her thoughts before the chaos of the day began. Today was important, not only because of her meeting at the Pentagon, but also because she knew this would be the start of something bigger. The federal investigation in Chicago had already sent shockwaves through the local police department, and now it was time to take things to the next level. After finishing her coffee, Maya dressed carefully. She chose a tailored gray suit with a crisp white shirt, wanting to look professional and composed. Her appearance mattered. It was part of how she carried herself in rooms where decisions were made. As she adjusted her blazer in the mirror, she reminded herself why she was doing this. This wasn't about revenge or personal gain. It was about creating change for people who didn't have a voice. When she arrived at the Pentagon, she was greeted by General Hayes. He shook her hand firmly, his expression serious. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "thank you for coming in on such short notice. I know this hasn't been easy for you." "Thank you for making this a priority, sir," Maya replied, keeping her tone respectful but firm. "This is bigger than me. It's about fixing a broken system." General Hayes nodded. "I couldn't agree more. Let's get started." They walked together to a conference room where several other high-ranking officials were waiting. The room was sleek and modern, with large screens lining the walls and a long table surrounded by leather chairs. Everyone stood as Maya entered, acknowledging her presence with nods and murmurs of respect. She took a seat at the head of the table, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. The meeting began with an update from Agent Daniel Brooks, who joined via video call from Chicago. His face appeared on one of the screens, his expression serious. "We've reviewed the surveillance footage and spoken to witnesses," he explained. "There's clear evidence of misconduct. Officers Miller and Blake acted aggressively without justification, and their actions align with patterns we've seen in other cases involving racial profiling." One of the officials leaned forward, frowning. "Are you saying this isn't an isolated incident?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Brooks replied. "Based on our findings so far, these officers have histories of similar behavior. Complaints have been filed against them in the past, but they were either ignored or dismissed due to lack of evidence." Maya listened intently, her hands clasped tightly on the table. Hearing this confirmed what she already suspected. The problem wasn't just with these two officers, it was systemic. And that meant the solution needed to be systemic too. General Hayes turned to Maya. "Ms. Johnson, you've been working on Sentinel, correct? Could it play a role here?" Maya nodded. "Yes, sir. Sentinel is designed to analyze data and identify patterns of misconduct among public servants, including law enforcement. It uses AI to flag behaviors that may indicate bias or abuse of power. If deployed properly, it could help prevent situations like mine from happening again." The room fell silent as everyone processed what she'd said. One of the officials spoke up, his voice cautious. "Deploying something like that nationwide would require significant resources and cooperation from local departments. Do you think they'll go along with it?" "It won't be easy," Maya admitted. "But if we frame it as a tool to improve accountability and build trust with communities, they might see the value. Plus, with the current public pressure, they won't have much choice." General Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "Let's move forward with testing Sentinel in select areas, starting with Chicago. We'll use this case as a pilot program to demonstrate its effectiveness. If it works, we can expand it further." The group spent the next hour discussing logistics, how to implement the program, who would oversee it, and how to address potential pushback from police unions. Maya contributed ideas whenever she could, her passion evident in every word she spoke. By the end of the meeting, there was a clear plan in place. Sentinel would be integrated into the investigation in Chicago, analyzing not only the actions, of officers Miller and Blake, but also broader trends within the department. Back in Chicago, news of the federal intervention spread quickly. Captain Laura Simmons called a meeting with her team to discuss the situation. Officers Miller and Blake sat at the back of the room, their faces tense. They still didn't seem to grasp the seriousness of what was happening. Simmons stood at the front, her arms crossed. "Listen up," she said, her voice firm. "Federal agents are taking over this case. They're reviewing everything, from your conduct to department policies. This isn't just about you two anymore. It's about all of us," Miller scoffed, shaking his head. "They're blowing this out of proportion. We were just doing our jobs." "No," Simmons snapped, turning to glare at him. "You weren't doing your jobs. You profiled someone based on their race, restrained them without cause, and humiliated them in public. That's not acceptable, not here, not anywhere." Her words hung in the air, silencing any protests. For once, no one argued. Simmons continued, her tone softer but still resolute. "I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know this. We need to do better, all of us. If we want to regain the public's trust, we have to hold ourselves accountable." The meeting ended. Simmons stayed behind, staring at the empty chairs. She felt a mix of emotions: anger at Miller and Blake for causing this mess, frustration with herself for not speaking up sooner, and hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. Later that evening, she received an anonymous email. Attached was a document containing internal records, complaints filed against officers, disciplinary actions or lack thereof, and other incriminating details. At first, Simmons hesitated. Sharing this information could put her career at risk. But deep down, she knew it was the right thing to do. With trembling hands, she forwarded the file to Agent Brooks. Meanwhile, Maya returned home after the meeting, exhausted but hopeful. She turned on the news and saw coverage of protests spreading across the country. People were demanding justice, not just for her, but for countless others who had suffered similar treatment. Maya smiled faintly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Maya found herself at the center of a national conversation, her name and face appearing everywhere, from news headlines to social media posts. Protesters marched in cities across the country, holding signs that read "Justice for Maya" and chanting slogans against racial profiling. The movement grew larger than anyone had anticipated, fueled by videos of the airport incident and stories from others who had faced similar treatment. For every person who shared their experience, another stepped forward, revealing the depth of the problem. Maya spent most of her time working behind the scenes, coordinating with federal agents, lawyers, and activists to ensure the investigation remained thorough and transparent. She also began preparing for the upcoming congressional hearing, where she would testify about her ordeal. It was a daunting task, but Maya knew it was necessary. If she could speak directly to lawmakers and the public, she might be able to push for meaningful change. In Chicago, tensions within the police department continued to rise. Officers Miller and Blake faced mounting pressure as federal agents delved deeper into their pasts. Sentinel, the AI system Maya had developed, played a crucial role in uncovering troubling patterns. The program analyzed years' worth of data, identifying repeated instances of misconduct linked to specific officers and precincts. When the results came in, they painted a damning picture, not just of Miller and Blake, but of a culture that allowed such behavior to persist unchecked. Captain Laura Simmons watched the developments unfold with a mix of dread and determination. She knew the federal investigation would expose not only the actions of individual officers, but also the failures of leadership within the department. Simmons wrestled with her conscience, torn between loyalty to her team and the need to do what was right. In the end, she made a decision that surprised even herself. Sitting down at her desk late one night, she typed out a detailed report summarizing everything she had learned over the years: patterns of bias, ignored complaints, and systemic issues that needed addressing. She sent it to Agent Daniel Brooks, along with a note: "I hope this helps." Her courage did not go unnoticed. When Brooks received the document, he immediately forwarded it to his superiors, praising Simmons for her bravery. Though she feared retaliation, Simmons felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she believed she was doing the right thing. As the congressional hearing approached, Maya prepared meticulously. She rehearsed her testimony, fine-tuning every word to convey both the personal impact of the incident and the broader implications for society. General Hayes offered guidance, reminding her to stay focused and composed. "You're not just speaking for yourself," he told her. "You're speaking for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly because of their race." On the morning of the hearing, Maya dressed in her signature navy blue blazer, symbolizing professionalism and strength. As she walked into the packed committee room, cameras flashed, capturing her every move. Lawmakers sat at a long table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Reporters filled the rows behind them, notebooks and recording devices ready. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation. When it was her turn to speak, Maya approached the podium, her head held high. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Maya Johnson, and I am here today, not only as a victim of racial profiling, but also as someone who believes deeply in justice and accountability. What happened to me at O'Hare Airport was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern, a pattern enabled by systemic racism and a lack of oversight." She paused, scanning the room. Every eye was on her. "I was detained without cause, humiliated in front of strangers, and treated as though my identity meant nothing. But this isn't just about me. Across this country, countless individuals, especially people of color, are subjected to similar treatment daily. They deserve better. We all deserve better." Maya went on to explain how Sentinel worked, emphasizing its potential to identify and prevent misconduct before it escalated. She presented charts and graphs generated by the AI, showing clear evidence of discriminatory practices within law enforcement agencies. The data spoke for itself, leaving no room for denial. One lawmaker leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Ms. Johnson, do you believe technology alone can solve these issues?" "No," Maya replied firmly. "Technology is a tool, not a solution. Real change requires commitment, from leaders, from communities, and from each of us as individuals. But tools like Sentinel can help hold people accountable and provide the transparency needed to rebuild trust." Her words resonated throughout the room. Even those who had initially doubted her seemed moved by her conviction. When she finished speaking, the audience erupted in applause, a rare occurrence during congressional hearings. Maya stepped back from the podium, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. She had said what needed to be said. Back in Chicago, the fallout from the hearing was immediate. Officers Miller and Blake were suspended pending further review, and calls for their dismissal grew louder. Their union fought back, arguing that the backlash was unwarranted and politically motivated. Tensions between pro-police groups and activists reached a boiling point, with protests erupting outside the police station. Simmons found herself caught in the middle once again. Some colleagues accused her of betraying the department by sharing internal documents, while others quietly thanked her for having the courage to speak up. Despite the criticism, she stood by her decision, knowing it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, federal agents continued their investigation, using Sentinel to analyze data from other departments across the country. The findings revealed widespread issues, prompting lawmakers to propose sweeping reforms. Mandatory training programs, stricter oversight mechanisms, and independent review boards were among the measures being considered. Maya returned to Washington, D.C., exhausted but hopeful. She knew the fight was far from over, but progress was finally being made. As she looked out the window of her apartment, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This journey had been difficult, painful even, but it had also shown her the power of resilience and unity. Together, they were building a future where everyone could feel safe and respected, regardless of the color of their skin. The weeks that followed the congressional hearing brought a wave of change. The testimony Maya delivered had struck a chord with people across the nation. Lawmakers, inspired by her words and the evidence presented through Sentinel, began drafting new legislation aimed at reforming law enforcement practices. News outlets covered every development, keeping the public informed and engaged. Social media buzzed with discussions about accountability, transparency, and equality. For the first time in years, it felt like real progress was within reach. Officers. Greg Miller and Ryan Blake faced the consequences of their actions. After an extensive review of their conduct, bolstered by Sentinel's findings, they were fired from the Chicago Police Department. Their union tried to fight the decision, claiming they were being made scapegoats for a larger issue, but the overwhelming evidence left little room for argument. Federal charges were also filed against them for violating civil rights, ensuring that their case would be heard in court. Though some supporters rallied behind them, many others saw their downfall as a long overdue reckoning. Captain Laura Simmons emerged as an unexpected hero in the aftermath. Her decision to share internal documents with federal agents earned her both praise and criticism. Some colleagues ostracized her, accusing her of betrayal, while others admired her courage. Despite the backlash, Simmons remained steadfast. She gave interviews explaining why she had acted, emphasizing the importance of integrity and responsibility within law enforcement. "We can't fix what we refuse to acknowledge," she said during one televised appearance. "It's time to stop protecting bad behavior and start protecting our communities." The reforms sparked by the investigation gained momentum quickly. Congress passed a bill mandating nationwide training programs focused on bias recognition and de-escalation tactics. Independent oversight boards were established in major cities to monitor police activity and investigate complaints. Sentinel became a cornerstone of these efforts, deployed in departments across the country to identify patterns of misconduct before they escalated. Its success proved that technology could indeed play a vital role in fostering accountability. Maya continued to work tirelessly, traveling to different cities to advocate for the implementation of Sentinel and other reforms. She spoke at rallies, met with community leaders, and collaborated with government officials to ensure the changes stuck. Her presence inspired countless individuals who had once felt powerless to speak out. Many saw her not just as a victim of injustice, but as a symbol of resilience and hope. One evening, Maya stood before a crowd of thousands gathered in downtown Chicago for a rally. The energy in the air was electric, filled with chants and cheers. Protest signs waved overhead, illuminated by streetlights and cell phone flashlights. As Maya approached the podium, the noise softened into respectful silence. She looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, diverse yet united, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady and clear. "This movement didn't start with me, and it won't end with me. It belongs to everyone who has ever been treated unfairly because of their race or background. It belongs to everyone who refuses to accept injustice as normal." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We've made incredible strides, but let's not fool ourselves. There's still so much work to do. Passing laws and deploying technology are important steps, but true change comes from within. It comes when each of us commits to treating others with dignity and respect. When we hold ourselves accountable, not just when the cameras are rolling, but every single day." Her speech ended with a call to action, urging the crowd to remain vigilant and involved. As she stepped away from the microphone, applause erupted once again, echoing through the streets. People chanted her name, holding up their phones to capture the moment. Maya smiled faintly, humbled by the outpouring of support. But she knew this wasn't about her. It was about the collective effort driving the movement forward. In the months that followed, Maya's life settled into a new rhythm. She returned to her consulting work at the Department of Defense, balancing her professional responsibilities with her advocacy efforts. Though the spotlight had dimmed somewhat, she remained a prominent figure in the fight for justice. Her story served as a reminder that even those in positions of power weren't immune to discrimination, and that speaking out could lead to meaningful change. Sentinel continued to evolve under her guidance, becoming more sophisticated and effective. Drones equipped with the AI system patrolled urban areas, monitoring interactions between law enforcement and civilians. While some critics raised concerns about privacy, strict regulations ensured the technology was used ethically and responsibly. Over time, trust began to rebuild between communities and police forces, thanks in part to the transparency Sentinel provided. Maya often reflected on how far things had come since that fateful day at the airport. What had started as a personal ordeal had transformed into a national awakening. She thought about Officers Miller and Blake, whose lives had unraveled due to their own choices. She thought about Captain Simmons, who had risked everything to do the right thing. And she thought about the countless strangers who had shared their stories, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this fight. One afternoon, Maya sat in her office, staring at a framed photo on her desk. It was a picture of her family, her parents, siblings, and nieces, all smiling brightly. They had supported her throughout this journey, offering love and encouragement when she needed it most. Picking up the frame, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she also knew she wasn't walking it alone. As the sun set over Washington, D.C., casting golden light through her window, Maya turned back to her computer. There were emails to answer, meetings to schedule, and plans to make. The work never truly ended, but neither did the hope. For every challenge, there was an opportunity. For every injustice, there was a chance to create something better. And Maya Johnson intended to seize every one of them.